Facebook. Charmflair Auto Services Limited, number 1 Industrial Lane, Charmflair. We do it all.
Welcome to DriveTime Exchange. As rubber hits the road, hard talk meets great music. Monday to Thursday, 4 to 6 p.m. on NETT Radio, taking you above and beyond.
Justice. Ring the bell down there. Ring the bell for culture. Ring the bell down there. Ring the bell for freedom. Ring the bell down there. I said to ring up the bell for the rhapsodydom. Ring the bell down there. Bring it all over. Ring it all over. Ring it all over. Ring it all over. Come on, brother leader. It's high time.
Well, everybody, good afternoon to you, and of course, welcome. Good to have you here. It is New Era TT Radio, the heartbeat of the Caribbean, as we teach you above and beyond. We welcome you wherever you may be to the DriveTime Exchange, and of course, welcome to our moderator, host in between this session, and you're going to be finding him here on a Wednesday and a Thursday afternoon inside of the DriveTime Exchange. So let me say good afternoon and welcome, Andy Johnson.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Sir Charles.
How are you doing, Andy?
We're pretty good, thanks.
Yeah, I'm happy to know that. It's good to have you officially on the platform.
I appreciate the opportunity to keep talking with the people of Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean about matters pertaining to our independence, our prerogatives in society as we move forward.
All right. Well, we are moving forward, so it's all yours from here on in.
All right. Thank you very much. Well, I'm saying I'm happy to be part of this project, and where we could push some of the thoughts that need to undergo or accommodate and go along with our movements for further independence, further identification of what is ours and what is how we put history back into where it ought to be in terms of what really happened, as opposed to what we've learned, what we've been taught in schools. So we're talking on this edition of the program with retired Dr. Claudius Fergus. He's a strong hand in the question of changing the literature and the history that we've been taught, because one of the questions I have all the time with him and with people who think like that. So we grew up in an era in which, you know, the man who was said to have discovered this country, Christopher Columbus, he had I think I remember some of the way in which he was portrayed, that he was a Portuguese person he had his ideas about, you know, going around the world from there in those days, 14 whatever, and he had decided that if to get to the east, you had to go west, and coming west from where he was in Europe, in Italy, Portugal, wherever it was, that you could get to the east from going west. And so in coming west, he passed through these neighborhoods and created history, in the sense that those voyages formed the basis of our history, certainly in the time when I was in high school in the mid and late 60s. And of late, we've had some I would say magisterial pushback on a lot of that by persons such as Dr. Fergus, and he continues to point out the errors, and in some cases not errors. Some of this was designed, he says, to continue the monarchies that ruled our land at the moment. And so in the Express newspaper of Sunday on, there's this headline: Fergus urges quick action on Columbus statue removal. He says a lot of things about that as we move the country to where it should be. And he's agreed to be our guest on this first segment in this first intercourse with me on these frequencies and these services. So, Dr. Fergus, thank you very much. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, my brother Andy, and good evening to the listeners and viewers of your program. It's nice to be here. Huh?
All right, thank you very much. Let me just read from the first couple of paragraphs that we reported. This is in the Express of Sunday, August 3rd, about some things you said about having to do with the government's decision finally to move the statue of Columbus where he was, and the call is for it to be placed in a museum. We will talk about why that may still be necessary, even from somebody as radical on the issue as yourself. But this is how this story began in the Express, written by Vivian Bowen, retired senior history lecturer at the University of the West Indies and co-director of the Caribbean Freedom Project. Dr. Claudius Fergus has called for the immediate removal of the Christopher Columbus statue from Independence Square in Port of Spain. He warns that any delay could allow forces of imperialism to regroup and frustrate the process. On Emancipation Day, Port of Spain Mayor Chino Allen announced that the statue of Columbus at Tamarind Square along Independence Square will be removed and placed in a museum. He also stated that Oxford Street will be renamed after the Pan-African icon Kwame Ture. He used to be Stokely Carmichael. We'll talk about that as well. Dr. Fergus, in a telephone interview, said the Caribbean Freedom Project was pleased by Allen's announcement that the statue would be removed, but he stressed intentions must be matched with urgency. Let's get talking about that as we go through this piece and raise some issues to put in it. You say that there has to be urgency in this move.
Well, Andy, that statement is now history, so to speak, because the statue has come down last night. The mayor took down the statue from the plinth. The plinth is still up. I don't think they're going to move that, but the statue came down. I received a photo of the monument without the statue at 2:00 this morning. And from the Guardian report, it must have started around 10 o'clock, the operation to take it down, according to the Guardian report. But the statue is down. I don't know of its whereabouts, but the statue is down because the National Museum, I do not think, is ready for it. I presume it's going to be with the city corporation until such time. But the statue is down. So we all commend, that is, we as advocates for the removal of the statue, particularly the Crossroads Freedom Project, the Warab community, the Emancipation Support Committee, these organizations commend the mayor for keeping his promise in such a quick time. I think that was the surprise, that he made such a quick move. But he did invite us to a meeting on Tuesday, that is the day before yesterday. A number of us were invited for the evaluation inspection with him. We were there at Columbus Square. And after that inspection, he invited us to the boardroom of the corporation, and we had a long, fruitful discussion there. Now, that meeting, he indicated that he was going to move the statue, and he did acknowledge that the pushback, in fact, had already started, just as I inferred in the article. So he knew what he was up against, and I think moving expeditiously would have preempted, like a preemptive strike. It would have been a preemptive strike, so people can now perhaps complain, protest, and so on, but the statue will not go back.
So the action happened sort of taking people by taking people on the slide, because, as you say, if there were a crowd of people who were against the move, that could have affected the operations.
Well, I don't know if it would have, but of course the mayor is a political figure. He holds a political office, and he belongs to a political party. Not all members of that party supported the removal of the statue. So that is one of the forces he would have had to contend with. But there are people, some of the embassies, we know for a fact, at least the former Spanish ambassador, particularly, they asked him not to interfere with the statue, the former mayor. that he not interfere. And even as the new mayor took office, he was also asked by that same ambassador not to interfere with the statue. I don't think that ambassador is in Trinidad anymore. I think he was recalled. I cannot say the same for the current ambassador, but we know that there are members in the embassy who were supportive of the move, but the ambassador himself was totally against it. The Vatican has an official that equates with an ambassador, an emissary, that is called a nuncio, the papal nuncio, and he definitely was against the removal of the statue and put pressure on the former mayor not to interfere with the statue. The American ambassador, the previous one, was a member of the Knights of Columbus, and he was against the removal of the statue. And all of them were putting pressure on Mayor Martinez not to move the statue, and that pressure continued under this mayor. So to make that statement on Emancipation Morning, and within 6 days to move the statue, it's phenomenal. I mean, we commend him for his courage. It takes a lot of courage even to make the declaration, and then to go ahead and execute. It takes a lot of courage, and we really commend him for that.
Yeah, so that action wasn't dependent on what let's say the leading figures in the government may have felt or wanted.
My feeling is that it was not a party decision on the part of the PNM, and it was not a decision of the central government either. I'm not saying that the government opposed, but I don't think it was a decision of the government, because the mayor said categorically that it was his council that took the decision to remove the statue. He did not mention the central government. So this is a corporation decision, which is within their legal purview. They're in charge of the city. And it was always within their right to move the statue if they wanted to.
Yeah, that is intriguing, understanding how governments work, and so that this was seen as the prerogative of the mayor of Port-of-Spain, and that overrode any position that anybody in a higher political office might have had.
He had the legal authority, but of course, as a politician, we know that's not the way they operate. They would consult with their political bosses, in the party, in the government, and so on, because it was the party that would have nominated him to be the mayor of Port-of-Spain. So they do accede to those wishes, and perhaps orders as those things might be sometimes, not to interfere with certain things. We do not know for a fact that was done. All we can say is what we know, and that is it was a decision of the corporation to move the monument. And they went ahead, and it was one of the reasons that they were able to execute so quickly.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, since the last time we spoke, about I would say the power of your academic work on this issue, the stuff that you came to know, which would have made you make certain pronouncements upon. Among them, you see the Columbus statue in Port-of-Spain was never a neutral tribute to the explorer, but a carefully chosen symbol of white supremacy rooted in global imperialist ideology. And you also talk about the fact that he never really came here. For instance, he never set foot in Trinidad. You argue that his third voyage had nothing to do with discovering new islands. It was a military mission to recover many he had left behind in Hispaniola. Give us a sense of the nature of your scholarship that led you to find these things out, which are at variance with what we learned in school about how he came. And like I said, my understanding of it was that he was trying to find a path to the east, and something in him told him that you had to go west in order to go to east, and that some of the things that he was credited, if you like, with coming to these shores were not, in fact, factual?
Well, it's a fact that he came here. Whether it was accidental or not, has been debated. But the fact is that he came here and there were tragic consequences immediately upon and following his arrival here. What they don't tell us have been conveniently left out. You would have learned, as I would have learned in school, that as a small boy, as 14, he would have been on the ships, merchant ships, learning about navigation and so on. What they don't tell us is that part of that experience would have taken him to the west coast of Africa. Columbus himself said that he traded in West Africa for 23 years before he decided that he wanted to go to India. And being in Africa at that time, in West Africa, meant that he was involved in the Atlantic slave trade. So Columbus was a slave trader before he became an explorer. He was a slave trader. There's where he got his groundings in maritime affairs. He was a slave trader. He acknowledged that. In those days, people documented what they were doing. And he indicated that at that time, the empire of Songhai would have been a flourishing empire, the empire that succeeded the empire of Mali. And we know it is also documented in West Africa and in respectable Arabic sources in Arabic, which have been translated in the 20th century, that there was an emperor of Mali named Abu Bakari II, who in 1310 commissioned a voyage across the Atlantic, setting out hundreds of ships, they described them, and only one ship came back. And the captain of that ship explained that there was this very powerful river in the sea, he called it. We know it now as the Canary Current, that was difficult to get out of. So we know that there was a possibility that some of those ships, or most of those ships, would have been taken across the Atlantic. And some of them may have landed in different parts of the Caribbean and in Central America. We know that for a fact. Columbus himself talked about seeing black people on the coast of Panama and so on. He talked about them. He recorded some of the words spoken by the people, and those words were of the Mande language, including the word for gold and so on. And Ivan van Sertima has documented that in detail in his first book, They Came Before Columbus. And then in a follow-up to that, America Revisited. So the evidence is there that Columbus would have been able to acquire information from the coast of Mali, the Songhai Empire as it was. There was a second voyage in which Abu Bakari II himself would have commanded the fleet, and he too never came back. He never came back. And as a result of that, we find the rise of an emperor named Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa may not have been emperor of Mali if Abu Bakari had not ventured on that voyage. And Mansa Musa himself explained how he came into office because his uncle had undertaken this voyage. He told the visiting Arabic scholars that because people, the Arabs were in Mali, they even had a part of the city as a community of their own. They were allocated a part of the city. So that trans-Saharan trade would have brought them into Mali, and a number of them were resident there. So they knew those stories. Those were contemporary stories. So what I'm saying is it was highly possible that Columbus would have learned of that particular current as well. Because if you look at the trajectory of his voyage, before he took that, he would have left Spain and would have gone to the Canary Islands. The same Canary Islands off which, just off the coast of Mali. And from there, he took the same current, the very same current that took him to the Caribbean was the current most likely that took the Malian explorers across the Atlantic Ocean. So some of that knowledge that he had would have been acquired from the people of West Africa. It's almost certain about that as well. Knowledge of the maps. There were maps, there were known ancient maps that actually located the coast of Brazil in those maps. So Columbus may have been very well aware that if you sail west, you would land up in some land west rather than east. Even if he conceptualized it as sailing around the world and end up, he knew there was land on that side. He knew that from the ancient maps that were probably available to him. So some of that story was not told because it would have given credit to West African people for the great knowledge that they had at the time, and perhaps for preceding Columbus in that very important voyage that he claimed to be the pioneer of.
Yeah, I'm trying to avoid sounding like somebody who is entirely on his side, but what do you give him credit for, if it's anything?
No, well, if he's to get credit, I mean, anybody leading a voyage across the Atlantic in those days with the technology they had, with the kind of ship they had to be a courageous person as well. Whatever the objective you had to be a courageous person, right? It's not surprising that most of his crew were criminals out of the prisons and so on. Those were the people that they gave him, people who were, you can consider as expendable. You know, he himself, yes, he was a courageous person. We are not discrediting him for that. You know, what we are saying is that the consequences of his arrival were the kinds of disasters that, you know, he has to be that has to be accounted for, that have to be accounted for. Those disasters were in fact orchestrated by Columbus himself. We often tend to take Columbus out of the picture and say it was his men who did it, or it was the people he appointed who did it. But we have evidence from writings of the 16th century, the writings of Las Casas, of Montesinos, of Gomara. These men were writing in the generation that lived with Columbus, and they were saying that Columbus did these things, in addition to the fact that Columbus recorded a lot of those things in his diary, you know, where he ordered his men, you know, to rape young girls aged 9 and 10, saying that the younger the better, and so on, where you know, in retaliation, he ordered his men to kill hundreds of people. We know that. It was he who set up the concentration camp that they call the repartimiento, and which we know more in our history book as encomienda. Those were concentration camps in which the enslaved people were simply divided. We said, you know, they divided the land, but there were people on the land. So it is the people that they assigned to the Spanish invaders to exploit to the max, and those people were ordered to provide a certain amount of gold and cotton and food, you know, to the Spaniards within certain given time. Otherwise, they were severely punished. People were simply executed. Babies were dashed against rocks and so on, burnt to death. You know, Columbus ordered a number of these crimes, and in fact, we know that he was arrested by Francisco de Bobadilla on his third voyage and taken to Spain for trial. He was taken to Spain for trial and found guilty. But the Queen intervened because they probably thought that he could render greater service going back to find this promised gold that he told them about and in imprisoning him. You know, so he came back for a fourth voyage, but he was found guilty. And even by that time, they were trying to replace Columbus with a number of other explorers. So they were competing explorers, invaders, we like to call them, alongside Columbus. While Columbus was making those voyages, others were looking, you know, making similar voyages as well, commissioned by other people, you know, in that competition. And after the invasion of Mexico by Cortez and later Pizarro in Peru, Columbus virtually disappeared from Spanish memory. He disappeared. Even his body was sent to Santo Domingo for burial, right? And there is a painting in the National Palace in Portugal where they highlighted 4 of the great explorers. Da Gama was one of them, Vasco da Gama. Vasco da Gama, who actually reached India actually reached India around the same time that Columbus was around Trinidad on his third voyage. Vasco da Gama reached India. And in that painting, Columbus is the only explorer represented as bound in chains. And I wonder why they did that. They showed him in this ignominious position, right? Where he alone was the only explorer bound in chain. And this was so they were trying to tell you that this man, yes, he did some phenomenal things, but he's a rascal and a criminal. Even then, and it was only in the church that Columbus's memory was preserved, and I don't think we understand that. It is the church that preserved Columbus's memory. And in 1640, the date of his arrival in the Caribbean on that first voyage was synchronized with one of the greatest festivals in the church, the festival of the Sacred Heart of Mary, which they call Santa Maria del Pinar. So that the discovery of Columbus was a day now that was an honorific day in the Roman Catholic calendar. You know, but it was in the church. It's only in the 18th century that we see the revival and restoration of Columbus, but not in Spain, not in Portugal, nowhere in Europe. It was in the United States of America. They're the ones who popularized Columbus, resurrected Columbus for their own political and imperialist purposes.
Yeah, and you continue to lament what you say, the continuing direction of the education system that we are, well, children are being taught things now. You think that, in your view, you would throw them through the window, the kinds of narratives that still prevail.
Well, I also want to commend the teachers for the work that they have done to deconstruct that narrative as well, because you go into some schools and the young children are fully aware that Columbus is not someone that should be honored and revered. That happened in the schools. Of course, the textbooks do not always carry the full facts of Columbus. And we have this distorted perspective on the teaching of history, where we think we must begin with Columbus's voyages. Every aspect of the voyage is taught. Every island he visited, every name. They don't tell you the original name of the island. They just tell you that he renamed this island by this name. But we don't know the original name of the island. Fortunately, there are maps now, you know, with those names. And children need to be taught those names. Some of them are long, but we can be taught how to pronounce the names, right?
Yeah.
Yes, those maps are now available to us, so we can return to that. But the history is distorted. You get the idea that the Caribbean started with Columbus, started with the voyages of Columbus.
Yeah.
Even the history of Trinidad. You know, I'm confounded by the claim that modern history of Trinidad started in 1798. Why? Because Columbus passed. Nothing about the sovereignty of Trinidad changed in 1798. It was not until 1591 that the Spaniards established the first successful colony in Trinidad. So why do we change the chronology of Trinidad and start up in 1498? There's absolutely no logic in it at all, except Columbus passed. You know?
Yeah,
and to me, that is an insult to the indigenous peoples who successfully defended this island. You know, who were successfully drove off an attempt by the Spaniards to set up a slave trading base in Mucurapo after 3 years of fighting. The chief named Baucunari, some people call him Bocunari, you know, were able to chase off Sidenio, and that event would have secured the island for until 1591, when they came back and successfully established San Jose de Aruna, which is St. Joseph. And even then, the attacks on them continued. Of course, they weren't successful in driving them off. But even if you saying, okay, Spanish colonization meant something different, so significantly different that you need to start the chronology from there. But it's illogical to me and a contempt to start that history in 1498. But those are things we need to correct, and we need consensus on that.
Well, this is what I wanted to come to. How do we address those things? How do we fix the history, if you like to put it that way? And who has to buy that in order to make it become national policy and so on? We change the fundamental history, foundational history of our country.
Change by simply writing textbooks. There are people who perpetuate the false narratives because they are the ones writing the textbooks. And when they write the textbooks, they simply, regurgitate the colonialist narrative. Those textbooks become sanctioned by the Ministry of Education. So it is not sufficient to talk. I've said that over and over. We need to write our own history. The Igbos have a saying, that when the hunter writes the story, you get the hunter being the hero of that story. But when the lions write the story, the lion inserts himself as a hero. It's a different perspective that you get, and we are dependent on other people still who don't understand. In this case, even if they are Caribbean people, they don't understand the real history of the episode and events they're writing about. They simply take it for granted that the received knowledge is correct. And they continue with it. So one way is the history textbook. The other way is public advocacy as well. And we have been doing that. As I said, in spite of the textbooks, the teachers have been doing a good job. I commend them for that. They have been doing a good job. Generally speaking, those schools that I'm aware of, in contesting that colonialist narrative about Columbus. We have the thing is that we have materials, we have materials that we can use. We have Peter Tosh, for example, would have indicted Columbus as a criminal since early 1970s.
Yeah.
We have Stalin, one them, who would have looked at a number of these heroes. We have Shadow, Columbus is a liar. Columbus lie. Those are works that we can use perhaps as literature now to help not just history, because it's not only in history you have the opportunity to deconstruct the colonial narratives. You can do it through literature. So people who are writing even fictional novels and so on, they have that opportunity. Literature is a powerful tool in order to contest these colonialist narratives. You have the social studies, even the geography books, because the so-called discoveries were about the geography of the Caribbean, colonizing the geography of the Caribbean. So geographers and teachers of geography also have that responsibility to deconstruct the narrative. It's not just history. The onus is not just on the historians. Perhaps the historians would have the responsibility to do the research, intense research and so on, but they all have that responsibility to contest that narrative and to advance, the country into a more independent status, because independence, as you know, came with very little change. Besides the flag and the anthem and so on, came with very little change. And you would know, Andy, that it was 1970 that brought some significant changes for the first time, right? Compelled the government to address certain issues, including the education system, because we had a lot of school children involved in the Black Power Revolution, the National Organization of Revolutionary Students,
Yes.
They were involved, and they compelled the government to hold a symposium on education down at Chataramas, and out of that came a revision of the school curriculum and so on. So, it has been done. And once we continue to advocate and not drop the ball, we can get the change that we want, but we must not drop the ball and expect somebody else to do it. We have to do it for ourselves.
Yeah, and you talk about the NORS because it was a critical point. I mean, I was in fifth form at that time, and while all that bubbling was going on, one wasn't sure, at that point, which narrative to hold on to, and how you get accustomed to hearing something that was totally different from what you're learning in the textbooks. But you say that there's a strengthening wind. That's my description of it. Sort of behind some of these facts of knowledge that will, over a period of time, you think, although it may take too long, it has already taken too long to push the narrative in the right direction.
Yeah, I think so, because we will be projecting that as part of the reparatory justice program. Knowledge, the overthrow of the colonialist narrative, particularly the narrative that promote white superiority and non-white inferiority. We have to address those things. Those things are embedded in the history more than anything else, and have material expression in the names of places, the statues, and so on, that honor these very evil characters in history, right? The greatest villains of colonialism are the greatest heroes of imperialism. But what we ought not to carry on that tradition if we really claim to be an independent nation. So neocolonialism is not just about the economics of neocolonialism, but it is also about the mind. Intellectually, we continue to be colonized, and we have to decolonize our own minds, and that must be done through the education system in order to institutionalize it. Otherwise, we'll keep going forever doing it, by groups and individuals. It must be institutionalized, and the best place to institutionalize it is in the schools. And the best age group to do that with are the young children. You see, that is what the colonials understood when they went into new areas. The first two things they did was to set up a church and a school, and the people in charge of the school were the same people in charge of the church. So they understood that in order to win, in order to defeat and conquer, you had to conquer the mind above all else, because it was not a matter of the sword or the guns alone. It was about the mind. Ultimately, you had to conquer the mind, and the agency responsible for that mainly was the church, because the church was the one responsible for education in up to the 19th century. Education wasn't in secular authorities up to the 19th century. It was the church that was responsible, generally speaking, for education. And so we need to understand that, how they did it, in order to deconstruct it. If we don't understand how it was done, then it is very difficult to undo. We have to understand. Yes.
Is this work, you think, is decades behind where it should be, as opposed to?
We are getting there. Based on where we were at the beginning of this millennium, I think we are getting there. We are getting there. I think we can actually review the progress that we have made since that time. It's slow, but when you are pushing back against a system, I don't think it would be surprising that it's slow, right? Unless you have a revolutionary approach to it, like it would have been done in Grenada under Maurice Bishop, where you can, introduce massive radical changes overnight, or as is happening right now in the Sahel with Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. You can do that only under special revolutionary circumstances. But with operating within a democracy, you're going to get pushback. There's no question about that. But once you do not relent, I think ultimately you will be victorious. I believe in the history of progress, and ultimately you're going to get there. You may not get there yourself, but you do your part, and it will happen ultimately. That's what we are doing. We are doing our part. You are doing your part too, because all this is part of the conversation that we need to have.
Yeah.
Okay? These are the platforms.
You said something there. Yeah, you said something there which brought to mind the late great Reverend in the United States, who said that he was talking about what he saw, Martin Luther King, what he saw up ahead, and he said, "Well, I might not get there with you, but and he said after that, but he is seeing that he's sure that one day this will happen and that will happen.
Yes, Marcus Garvey said something similar, a more poetic way perhaps. He knew he would not be there all the time, but he understood that he could be, a sort of catalyst for change, even though he may not be alive. He said, I will always be with you. See me in the whirlwind. Look for me in the whirlwind. So it's that kind of idea. Visionary people understand that the task they have undertaken may not end with them, but they will and could remain an inspiration for those who take up the mantle of the struggle, ultimately.
Yeah. All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much, Dr. Professor Claudius Fergus, for always coming off as it should, pointing us in the direction that we should be going. And one suspects a sense of buoyancy because you're seeing some progress as little as it is.
This is a joyful period for advocates for decolonizing Trinidad and Tobago. It's not just a Columbus thing, it's about decolonizing the landscape. We are going to Lopino tomorrow. Crossroads Freedom Project is going to Lopino tomorrow. We have one of our projects was with respect to getting a signpost at Lopino taken down. We did get them to erase the text. They painted over the signpost. We have written a replacement text. Of course, could be modified by them, but we have a text. And we understand that there have been some recent excavations of the torture instruments that they used to restrain and torture enslaved people. They have recently excavated that. And we are going up there to look at that tomorrow, and also to advance the replacement of the text on the signpost with something much more relevant and educational, rather than the colonizing text that they had, honoring the slave master who established that estate, La Reconnaissance. That slave master was Count de Lopino. And by coincidence, it was his great-great-grandson that was is the architect that excavated those instruments. So we are going up there. We understand that some have been taken away, so we may have to make an intervention there as well, because those things belong there or belong to the National Museum. And no one should be allowed to take them away.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Claudius K. Fergus. We'll take a break. And when we come back, we'll be talking with Wendell Eversley, someone who was more or less taking this on as a one-man a mission. We'll tell you about that. We come back to Remember 1990. Stay with us.
He discovered new lands, and he thought that I wouldn't know. He discovered a lot of Indians who discovered the lands before. Columbus lie, Columbus lie, Columbus lie, Columbus lie, lie, lie. He took all the glory.
Your mid-morning just got better. Join Sir Charles for the mid-morning mix and mingle, where good music, real talk, health, and family matters come together, and your voice is heard. Whether you're at work, on the go, or just taking a break, this is the perfect mix to keep you engaged, informed, and entertained. The mid-morning mix and mingle, weekdays, 9 a.m. to 12 noon on New Era TT Radio, Net Radio.
Charmflair Auto Services Limited, your one-stop auto repair shop, located at number 1 Industrial Lane, Charmflair, right opposite the brewery on the Eastern Main Road. Yes, we do it all. Repairs to all makes and models, from your everyday sedan to SUVs, light trucks, pickups, and panel vans. We're also the sole distributors of Devante tires, certified VTS inspection station, plus a wide range of services: oil change, front end and suspension repairs, tune-ups, tire alignment, batteries, electrical work, radiator and cooling system, AC repairs, and accessories galore. We offer pickup and drop-off service too. Call us today at 662-6545 or 662-6572. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Chamflair Auto Services Limited, number 1 Industrial Lane, Chamflair. We do it all.
Bring you full discussions, the hottest topics, and some chats to keep you moving. The Drive Time Exchange on Net Radio, taking you above and beyond.
And there's an army in retreat. I see the old colonials of Europe become united, and perestroika fills the streets. I see the eagle on the shoulder of the bear, or maybe it's the other way around. Is this the calm before the hellfire, or is our tomorrow really heaven bound? But 1990, the blood flows in Bogota, and from Beirut to Johannesburg, the rivers don't stop.
So we welcome you back to the Drive Time Exchange right here on New Era TT Radio with Andy Johnson. Andy, it's all yours.
Thank you very much once again, Mr. Charles. Well, with us now, Mr. Wendell Eversley. We heard a lot about the country's history, misplaced, mistimed over decades, over centuries, as a matter of fact, and there are promising signs, uplifting signs to get them back where they should, back the history in the country as it should be. We're talking now about an event which changed things a lot for some of us in Trinidad and Tobago, the attempted coup in 1990. What has happened as a result of from it? There's one person who keeps reminding us that we ought not to forget, and he leads a walk, or not leads, because he conducts a walk from Arima to Port of Spain every day in the year that marks that day, July 1990, what transpired. He continues to keep bringing that to our attention. In some cases, there's some of us who would rather forget. Wendell Eversley, he's at the microphone. Good to see you, my friend.
Yeah, good afternoon. Good evening to all your listeners, and thank you for having me this afternoon to discuss a very important chapter in our country history. It's something that we should never forget, and we ought not to forget about what took place 35 years ago, the attempted coup of 1990.
All right. Well, talk with us about how easy, how difficult it is, as it seems in a lot of cases, you carry a weight about this on your shoulders by yourself.
Yeah, because I will never forget when I took it upon myself to go to the parliament 35 years ago. It was my first day in parliament, and I went to listen as a civilian to see how our parliamentarians conduct their affairs in making sure that legislations are put in place so that Trinidadians and Tobagonians can benefit. And it was my first day, ended up being my nightmare. And I will never forget what took place, especially that Friday leading to Saturday morning. And what I see, it was an attack on our democracy. It was an attack on our institution. And it was an attack on the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And we should remember that what took place, lives were lost innocently. We must remember also what took place on that dreadful day is that a sitting prime minister, members of his cabinet, members of parliament, and along with civilians, was held against their will. Some spent the whole 6 days. I saw people get murdered in the parliament. I saw bodies lying on the stairways of the entrance of the parliament. I was made a human shield by having a tour of the parliament, opening windows and in some cases doors for a group of terrorists to enter the parliament chamber. I get licks on my head with a gun butt for not carrying out the instructions because I was so frightful of my life that if I did not continue obeying the instructions, I could have been a dead person. But most of all, I have to thank God for having me where I am today. And I will not like to see something like this take place in our country today. Because from what we have seen back then in 1991, I will say it was stage 1 cancer. And today, it's stage 5 cancer to get out of hand. And if the authorities that act, the first year in 1991, when I did the run for freedom from Arima to Port of Spain, it will act immediately in dealing with that situation, rather than take 20 years to set up a commission of inquiry. 20 years, 2 years of sitting at the Caribbean Court of Appeal. And on Henry Street, I attended 95% of the sittings for 2 consecutive years. Recommendations was forwarded back then to the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, Anthony Kambon. And that was laid in Parliament by the then Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar. 12 chapters, she said they're going to implement and honor every single chapter, especially where the Commissioner said that chapter 11 and 12 should be treated confidentially. And she said, no, it is in the hands of the Parliament that she's laid it out and it will not be treated privately. I was there when the commissioners hand over the report to the President, because I stood at the entrance, because that was important to me, because to know that we are talking about our country that was under attack. We are talking about lives was taken away innocently. I remember Lauren Caballero, and it lived through me right through. It don't have a year past that I don't ever think about Lauren Caballero, especially when they drag her in front of me. And I watch her staring in my eyes, blood pouring out her belly and her mouth. She got shot. Later on, I get to realize that the woman who they shot, her name was Lauren Caballero, who I saw bleed to death, watching in my eyes, my hands behind my head, a gun pointing at my head, a young boy about 16 years guarding me, and I couldn't lift a finger. Andy Johnson, watching a woman staring in my eyes, bleed to death that Friday night. It was the most horrible time in my own entire life. That will live with me until I die. When people see me walking on July the 27th, I reminding them that is our democracy, our institution, our parliament, the highest court of the land, was under attack. I reminding them that lives were lost innocently. I reminded them that we should not forget those hostages in TTT, Radio Trinidad, and in the parliament. I reminded them that one man said, attack with full force, they are torturers, they are murderers, rather give up his life than give in. Andy Johnson, our 41 members of parliament, and our 31 senators, when that day come about, you don't see them around. Andy Johnson last year, I was in America, New York City. September 11th, I went to pay and lay out of flowers to the Trinidadians who lost their life 23 years back in the attack of America. And you know, when I reached in New York City and I watched the proceedings, thousands of people, I watched the president, Biden, who was the president back then, his vice president, Kamala Harris, was there. I watched the Republican president nominee, which was Donald Trump, and his vice president nominee, Vance, was there. I watched Republican governors, Republican senators. I watched Democrats, governors, and Democrat senators all there. I watched over 2,000 and something names of read out. It takes hours. And I get to realize that every year they do that because they come together to recognize that people lost their life and something like that will never happen again in the United States of America. But in Trinidad here, 24 names they cannot read out. I wrote past prime minister, current prime minister, past president, past speaker of the House of Representatives, present speaker of the House of Representatives. I even wrote Senate president, begging them, join with me. When that day reach, you see a certain clique, I call them a clique, come and lay a wreath. Last year, the most disrespectful day in the history of our country is when the current president, went on the 29th to lay a wreath instead of the 27th. I said it was a disrespect to every single hostages. It was a disrespect to the family who lost their loved ones. When we could get that from the head of state, what you expect from the bottom? When we could see that Speaker of the House of Representatives, and you write them, and they fail to even acknowledge your letter, then tell you something went wrong. When a head of state could reply to you and tell me take up my matter with the government, when she is part of the government, when she meet with the prime minister, because the constitution states that the prime minister and the president meet to discuss if it's once a month, once a fortnight, once a week, concerning governance of Trinidad and Tobago. But she couldn't tell the prime minister, I have been receiving this letter every year on the 30th of July, on the 30th of June.
So what do you expect should be happening? What do you advocate should be happening? Because there's a site in the ground in the Red House which people go and pay homage and so on. You think that is
not enough. That is not enough. Chapter 11. I don't know if you ever read the 2 volumes of the commissioner's report. I remember meeting Mary King. Not Mary King, Diana Mahabir Wyatt. She was a commissioner. I met her 2 years ago in Piaco. She came up to me and she said, Wendell, it's so sad to see that after all those years and the commissioner that sit, they haven't done nothing where the hostages is concerned. The family that lost their loved one, which is in chapter 11. All I just want them to do, you could have spent millions of dollars. Do you know that the person who was responsible for the destruction and the attempted coup get over 13 point something million for their properties?
No, I wasn't
Do you
aware
know
of that.
right? Do you know that the only set of people benefits from that was the lawyers, the commissioners? Do you know that it said in chapter 11, ensuring that the victims of the attempted coup and the society as a whole are satisfied that their pain, their loss, the suffering, and the damage have been acknowledged with a view to fostering closure of the events surrounding the attempted coup with a view to the promotion of individual and community healing in the interest of national development. This is the recommendation. This must be implemented. We talk about the school children. Today, we hearing the commissioner of police, the current commissioner of police, say that he already have trained police officers to go in hotspot schools. Why we have to reach this stage in our country, in Trinidad and Tobago today? Well, I'm making a challenge to the government and to the Minister of Education. I'm willing to give my time. For that, I want the Minister of Education to reach out to all the school supervisors throughout Trinidad. I went to Tobago on the 25th with my walk from A&R Robinson International Airport to by his graveside, lay a wreath. And I threw it outside, I threw out also to the Secretary of Education in Tobago that I'm willing to talk about going to the schools in Trinidad and Tobago and to lecture about 1990. Because it's in the recommendation, the school should know, the school children should take a part of our country history. And why it is all government failing to heal to the recommendation. The former Prime Minister Keith Rowley said in the Parliament, get up and read it. He said that's how they are going. And to pay compensation.
Okay, good.
And to pay compensation. Before Parliament was dissolved, the former MP for Naparima, Rodney Charles, get up and ask the question to the Prime Minister. What about the compensation? He all said, he said it's in the hands of the Attorney General and it's in the final stages. I heard this year where the current Prime Minister said there's going to be a national day of commemoration and she's going to deal with compensation and Chapter 11. She's going to implement it. I want to see that this have been come and bear fruit. Selby Wilson still alive. Winston Dukaran still alive. Movin Assam still alive. Roy Raphael still alive. Joseph Tony still alive. And all those people suffer along with me in the Parliament. They suffer in the Parliament, and what happened? When July the 27th comes, no mention have been mentioned about these people. No mention have been mentioned about the family who lost their loved one. And on that day, it has been the hardest day in their life, knowing that their loved one life was sniffed out innocently. When I went to Moruga this year to lay a wreath after all my tiredness walking from Arima to the eternal fame, went to Moruga to lay a wreath at PC Solomon graveside. His mother in her 80s can't catch herself knowing that her son was the first person to be murdered on that day at 23 years old. 23 years. But here in this country, they're finding money to do all sorts of things. Here corruption left, right, and center.
You're hearing about corruption in CPEP, corruption in
Something
Well,
seems to be
yeah,
happening with
it's
your
gonna be Wendell. I
video.
don't know if your microphone or something is just kind of shorting
Something
us
went
out.
wrong with your audio.
Yeah,
You hear me now?
yeah. We
Yes.
hear.
Go ahead.
So when they find money to do all sorts of things, you hear how much money lawyers getting, feeding frenzy. I see a politician try to see if he could score political mileage who's a lawyer with the diverse family. But that same politician didn't lift a finger for the 24 persons who was murdered and said to compensate them. This is what we are seeing in this country today.
Why do you think you are carrying the weight of all of that on your own shoulders by yourself?
I'm not carrying this all by myself. God put me to carry it to awaken the nation and let them know that history could repeat itself if they do not deal with what happened 35 years ago. And we're seeing it today. You heard what the Commissioner of Police said. You heard why it is we have a state of emergency today. You know, in chapter 12, talk about security gathering and security intelligence and command center. Do you know that members of the protective service and the army went before the commissioners and said back then we did not have these things? Back then, one person used to report to the prime minister alone. Do you know that it's because of the commission set and we see certain institutions and command centers have been put in place? It's because of after 20 years, you heard a former commissioner of police speak about it. You heard a current commissioner of police say they're ready to deal with any incident of 1990. 1990, you heard also too, when they say it have gangs behind the wall and gangs outside and how they come together and form themselves in a large unit and what they was going to do, assassinate who? Judges, magistrates, senior police officers, lawyers. He stopped short of saying politicians. But I believe politicians name in it also. You heard why it is the extension of the state of emergency to another 3 months. We don't know after they will go back for another 3 months and they might impose this trip a curfew. We heard also too, just recently, they hold a certain individual high-powered rifles. We heard a former commissioner of police went before a joint select committee of parliament and talk about who is in the parliament dealing with criminals, young leaders. So what we are seeing today, we see the cancer spread and it get out of hand. The commissioner of police is telling us now if we see something, come and report. But how much?
That has been a slogan for some time now, you know.
Yeah, for some time now, but this present commissioner of police telling the population, he said it is serious out there. When you go to Tunapuna, Andy Johnson, because you live in the east, from 6 o'clock, the place like a ghost town. Even in a room a long time, you could get up and go and get your soup and bacon shark and bacon saltfish. It's not this, you're no longer. The people who used to do it selling in the night to make little living, live off of that. No, they cannot.
I want to go back to the remembering July 27th, 1990, and your visits to Tobago. You said that you caused action to be taken on the cleaning of the grave of Mr. Robinson. There was an issue that you found that you wanted to know why his grave was in the state that it was when you saw it.
And it is the third time the grave is that state that I highlighted. And then after the run, the first is where they had the grave in a dilapidated state. And the managing director of Clark and Batu, when I exposed it, tell me that it's going to build a marble stone, a granite grave frame tomb. And they went and did it because I exposed it. I went and exposed how they had the condition of it. And I remember Watson Joke was the deputy chief secretary, came to one of my reclaim ceremony, along with different secretaries of the various divisions. One was the secretary for works also. I know what they tell me, you know what they said there to the media, in my presence, that they would teach it in schools in Tobago. They will let Tobagonians know what this great man have done for Tobago. They said the tomb will be a tourist attraction. I know all that fall on deaf ear. All that. Today you hear when I exposed, when I went to the bush and the thing what they're saying is a private cemetery. If it's a private cemetery, what it is will take them to go to the authorities or the church and let the church know, right, what this man did for Tobago. The first prime minister from Tobago, first president from Tobago, first chairman of Tobago House of Assembly, the first chief secretary for Tobago, the one who was responsible and played an instrumental role in the formation of the Tobago House of Assembly where they sit today, and the most of all, a founding member of the ICC, where in The Hague, a hall is named after him. So you don't think people will want to know who or where this great man buried? That to show you, and then after they say that private, but you know, they will get money to do all sorts of things. What it is to just have a simple, have a coup to maintain that cemetery. But again, who really cares? Who really cares? So if they could treat those who have come before and those who have played a very important role in the development of Trinidad and Tobago, it so clearly they don't really care. That's why you see our country where it is in the state it is today. And then we just want to blame children. We want to blame the students. But if we're not being the role models for them, how do you expect them to follow suit?
So you would keep advocating more attention paid to the issue and the people who were part of the movement that led to it.
Yet I will keep advocating for Chapter 11. Chapter 11 must be implemented. It's part of our history, and we cannot run and hide from our history. Andy Johnson, you interviewed me numerous times on the other frequency concerning 1990. So Charles interviewed me numerous times when he had a program from 9 to 12 on another frequency. I am not going to stop until Chapter 11 is being implemented.
To be more and better attention paid to the issue, to the outcome.
And how the day, not a public holiday, how the day should be recognized and remembered. And it's time we stop disrespecting. And I will take a page from Dominic Kalipasad. He fed up at the old talk. and the promises. Dennis, I'm not Dennis, Dominic Ali Prasad,
Dominic.
right? Watch the role that he played. He talked about Jones P. murderer. Do you know when I used to be fasted in front of the Parliament building? And to the just out in his statement, Pantin.
Yeah, Archbishop.
No, Dennis Pantin.
Dennis Pantin. Okay.
Used to come and sit down with me and cry. And when he's sitting down, his hands shaking. He never get over how he was treated for that period in TTT. A woman came to me while I was in front of the eternal flame and said her son was a member of the Jamaat, a young son, and she said she didn't know her son was going and being trained when she thought her son was just going to the mosque to learn about
Islam and so on.
Islam, but he was put gun, and she said her son died. She came in front and cried. Lauren Cabrera's son came to me and asked me who killed her mother. I said, don't ask me, ask Abubakar. He came in front of the Parliament and cried. Her daughter, I met her in a restaurant, working 5 restaurants. She came up to me and she said, every year just watch you. She said, I was 3 months old, but she lost her mother. After that, for the past 10 years, I've been inviting her to come and let her read in front of the Parliament. She went before the commissioners. She lived up to today in a Baptist church in Mongdo. People, you know, what people went through, you know, the loved ones went through, you know, who suffered. Families who lost their lives. We see today the TTPS is crying out for the members who lost their life in the protective service, so that more recognition and more should be done. But who really listening? Who listening? When a country don't learn from their past, it's doomed to happen again.
You think you feel strongly about that? You feel strongly about that?
Yes, because what we are seeing today, it started, and I will say it's because of 1990. And when they released them, it was like a carnival. And sometimes we have to tell and say it as it is, call a spade, and don't run from it. And politicians must always feel that some gang member, some gang leader will help them win election. And when they go to bed with those people, what has happened is that they are havoc in their own committee. No wonder we in this state that we are in today.
But you, as the song goes, you're not gonna get weary about maintaining that advocacy for right action.
No. The only time I get weary is when God called me home. And somebody will listen. Somebody will listen. And when they listen, they will put what I've been saying into action.
All right, I'm afraid you're gonna have to leave it there. But thank you very much. I salute your passion and your continued the sense of assault and the absence of a proper response from people across the country is very deep. But thank you very much.
Yes,
thank you very much. Wendell Eversley. We will take a break. More on the other side. Stay with us.
I see the eagle on the shoulder of the bear, or maybe it's the other way around. Is this the calm before the hellfire, Or is our tomorrow really heaven bound? But 1990, the blood flows in Bogota, and from Beirut to Johannesburg, the rivers don't stop. 1990, third world children still wander in their boats, their jungles, their deserts, until they drown. It is strange. More we change, rearrange. Everything just seems the same as we move into the next century. 1990, please make a liar of me. There is a black man on the run through a lonely Beijing street. There he goes, my God, he's running again. This time through Brooklyn's Howard Beach. And there he goes again through the streets of Soweto. I'm saying, so this story goes. And the man they call Alabama shrugs and says, deja vu, I suppose. 1990, will our children stand firm, or will they keep running and running and running till the end of time? 1990, will hands of love ever reach out, or will they be there just to strengthen the crown?
Join me, Brother David Muhammad, every Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. here on New Era TT Radio, Net Radio, Powerful Radio. Join me to hear knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Tuesdays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. here on New Era TT Radio, Net Radio.
Men, women, tired of the invasive, painful old methods of testing prostate and breasts?
The Institute of Health and Fitness Clinic and Wellness Center offers comprehensive and non-invasive diagnostic testing, which indicates the nature and extent of diseases and tests your nutritional levels. Our quick testing can identify early signs of problems by evaluating many of the bodily functions, such as male and female sexual function, gastrointestinal function, liver function, kidney function, thyroid function, heart and brain function, and also cancer testing. Results are comparable with other medical lab tests without the use of needles or embarrassing specimen cups, and is pain-free. We also offer all natural treatments. Visit us now at number 79 St. Vincent Street, Tunapuna, or call 492-7397 or 289-6363.
Advertise with us on New Era TT Radio, the fastest growing streaming platform for talk in Trinidad and Tobago. Audio and video ads welcome. Elevate your brand with us. Connect with us at newerattradio@yahoo.com or call us at 299-5156. Now what are you waiting for?
Because I'm begging the master, give me our quick Peter. If I some sinners coming, with them I go be dealing. Because the things that they do me, I want to fix them personally. Peter wait, Peter looks as the roads by the gate. Peter, look the Englishman, we send Cecil Rhodes to Africa land. Peter, take drink, take rally, but leave Victoria for me. Peter, I just don't care what you say, but Mussolini, he can't get away. Why? That I undergo from these madman and woman. I feel the full weight of the hand. They made the oppressed law. They never care about the poor. Peter, these people had the day. Well, now it's time for Stalin to play. Peter, wait, I said Peter, wait. Peter, look, Ian Smith by the gate. Peter, I don't want you to make fuss. Remember, I want Christopher Columbus. Peter, look, the Englishwoman who on South Africa refused to put sanctions.
All right, everybody, and of course we are back inside the final session here on New Era TT Radio on this Thursday afternoon. This is the DriveTime Exchange with Andy Johnson. Andy, well, your guest made it just in time. I was giving him time to settle in. I saw him hustling.
Very good, very good.
Good afternoon, Shabaka.
Greetings, Sir Charles.
How are you doing?
my friend?
Not bad at all.
You're kind of stubborn. I don't know, the microphone or something.
No, man. All is well, brother.
I get in like a static on the microphone.
Okay, so what would usually cause that is perhaps a quick restart. So just give me 1 second to return to the studio and we'll be all right.
Yeah, no problem. So while he resets and you and I can chat.
What is your take on some of what you're hearing about, the history, particularly in the first case with Dr. Fergus on the history of the country? My sense is that he's saying that it has to be rewritten because what we have been taught in schools for decades, probably centuries, is not the real story. And that has been central to his scholarship all these years that I've known him. How some things got to be gospel when in fact they're not true at all. And one has to be cognitive of the passion by our last guest there, by Wendell Eversley. And he's maintained a one-person kind of institution to respond to the events that took place on July 27, 1990 to the day, and he gets more and more passionate as the years go by.
It's a huge task, Andy, and in listening to Dr. Fergus, and for people like him, we have to really appreciate those who would have done the research to more or less right the wrongs, but sometimes I know it's a huge task, but just like as the saying says, and you all draw, we are doing the groundwork now, but the others will finish the task. When that will be, we will never know, but it's a huge undertaking. It's a huge
and our next guest is someone of, I would say, of the generation that has taken the battle.
That is it.
Is running with it in some particular directions. Chivaka Kambo, and let me see if I get it right. You're a leading member of the Caribbean Freedom Project, is it?
Yes, I'm the executive director.
Right. Yeah. And so let's put these days we still sort of in the wake of emancipation and so on. Let's put that in context as to where we are and how we going forward on these issues that are relevant and that required for, I would say, truthful and comprehensive rehabilitation, redirection our society.
Okay, so let me say, I just heard the name of Dr. Claudius Fergus, so I imagine you all had him on before I was here.
In the first segment.
So Dr. Fergus would be one of those regional Caribbean historians who is actually in the archives doing the research. I think there are about 3 generations of academics now who have been contesting the narratives that we would have been bequeathed by the colonials. Those are the people who, what we are seeing today is really sort of a consensus based on the research of the academics. And so what we're doing right now is we are emphatically stating to the former colonial powers that we no longer agree to go along with their interpretation of the invasion and genocidal occupation of the Caribbean, which they wanted, which they had agreed with us, on a kind of a silent, unwritten agreement to see through the lens of discovery. And of course, that lens, that imperialist view of the past, rationalizes the expansion of empire, the subjugation, enslavement, and extermination of native peoples and their lands, and frames the protagonists of these great crimes as heroes and agents of progress and civilization. We were part of a compact or an agreement. And the first time I saw this agreement referenced was when the president of Mexico called on Spain and the Vatican to apologize for the actions of the discoverer there, Hernan Cortez, there Columbus, and the actions and the genocidal actions that took place thereafter. And Spain, in her response to Mexico, was that, we already have an agreement about how to view the past. Our peoples already have an agreement. Well, the Caribbean is saying today that we emphatically reject this agreement. We will no longer view the invasion and occupation of the region through the lens of discovery, through the imperialist lens. We will see it for what it was and acknowledge it as such.
And there must be instruments under which, as a result of which, you all seem to go forward. Let's talk a little bit about some of those things. What do you, in the industrial relations world, it's called sort of demands made on the employers. And so, what are some of the demands that the project is insisting on must happen?
Well, in terms of our work now extends beyond Trinidad and Tobago. We are working, I'm sure Dr. Fergus may have mentioned it, but we have written the Prime Minister of the Bahamas, asking him to follow, the lead of Trinidad and Tobago, to look critically, to set up a committee to look critically at their monuments to Columbus. And of course, the monument there that was sledgehammered in 2021, which they are trying to figure out what to do with, is the oldest Columbus monument in the region. And we have also written the Mercy Committee of the Bahamas to ask them that they overturn the conviction against the young man who used the sledgehammer in 2021. That young man, Shervandazi Michael the Archangel Smith, was convicted in October last year and is now in the process of paying a fine. And we think that money should be given back to him, and that he should be, rather than treated as a villain, he should be seen as a hero along the lines of Rosa Parks, who catalyzed the civil rights movement by disobeying an unjust law. And of course, in the Caribbean, and we've been working on this legal discourse for some time, and we had actually written the former Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, something of a pre-action protocol letter when the issue was moved from the Mayor Martinez's office to the Prime Minister's office back in, I think it was 2020. We got Bethany Chambers and what's his name? Just slipped me for a second there. One of the partners there at Bethany Chambers to craft a legal letter to Dr. Rowley, which relied on the Constitution and some other legal mechanisms to argue that it really was illegal for us to continue to celebrate Columbus in Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, our legal discussion has shifted somewhat since then, because now we're pointing out that, there's several countries in the world that have laws against the minimization, trivialization, denial, or celebration of genocide. And Christopher Columbus monuments do all those things. And so nobody should be tried or convicted for standing up against such an abomination, a concrete abomination, as we like to call it.
Yeah, you said it's illegal for us to be celebrating, well, let's say not emancipation, but discovery and matters of that sort.
It actually could be illegal. As I say, there are several countries in the world, predominantly in Europe, that have laws against, there's a principle against trivializing or denying a genocide. And all of this is now being sort of played out in Palestine. We have, as we reflect on this historical genocide, and as we come to terms with this historical genocide, we must realize that the crimes that Columbus set in motion in 1492, what we're seeing in Israel today is the tail end of it. It's the last version of it, the illegal sort of outlier in the 21st century. It shouldn't exist. It should have, it's what we would call an atavism, a throwback to the past, but it is a continuation of white settler colonialism. With all the dimensions that were there in 1492, demonstrated today in 2025.
You raised the issue of Israel and in where they are and how they operate. You think that there's going to be reckoning for that on Israel?
In the same way, as we say, was it Martin Luther King who said that the arc of history bends towards justice?
Yeah.
And so, the time frame for reckoning with Columbus was 500 years. I don't think Israel's going to have 500 years before the reckoning comes to them.
You feel strongly about that?
Well, I am just reading the history as we see it. I don't think that they're going to be given, and you could tell. I mean, how fast things have arrived at this point. I mean, Columbus was condemned, I would say, starting in 1511 with the Christmas sermon by Antonio de Montesinos, when he stood in front at the altar at that famous church in what is today the Dominican Republic, and told Columbus's brothers and his sons that they were going to hell for the crimes that they were committed against the indigenous people. But at that time, there was no kind of global outcry as we see today. And so the colonists, Columbus's brothers and sons, were able to have the Jesuit priests that were led by Montesinos return to Spain and to get some priests in that would rubber stamp their colonization, their violent colonization efforts. But according to good will always conquer evil, Andy.
Yeah, ultimately.
In a nutshell.
Ultimately. Yeah,
yes.
So I want to ask you about some of the stuff that you're doing on the local scene to address some of these imbalances, going forward with some of the current work of the Freedom Project.
Yeah, well, tomorrow I will highlight another. Tomorrow we'll go to Lopino at midday, where the new narrative that was born out of our No Loyal Slaves campaign is beginning to emerge. They have been able to find shackles on the estate, and Dr. Fergus will be there to look at them and to begin the process of authenticating them. If they are indeed authentic, what they will be perhaps the only known implements of colonial violence available to the public in the country. So when we started this work, Lopino was in essence a place where people were being miseducated to venerate the slave master and his wife as illustrious, and by extension all slave masters, and to see and ridicule the people they worked until death in a space of 5 and 6 to 9 years as loyal slaves. They were called to pay homage to Lopino and his wife at their raised graves on the estate. Today, we've overthrown that narrative, and people are beginning to look squarely at the facts. We've given the people of Lopino and the authorities the names of the Africans who were enslaved on that estate, and we've given them the words of our ancestors. Brother, what's his name? Otoba Kuguano, for example, who said that slavery was a crime of the first magnitude, and that he who does not have love for his fellow men, none of his other virtues are worth a straw. And of course, that statement by Kuguano applies to all the spaces where we continue to honor those people who committed colonial crimes. And of course, colonialism was really one big crime. You're talking about genocide, slavery, indentureship, and apartheid. That's what we suffered under colonialism. And so the protagonists of those crimes, according to our ancestors, Otoba Kuguano, John Stewart was his European name, Otoba Kuguano his African name. They were involved in crimes of the first magnitude, and none of their other virtues are worth a straw because of that. And we have to start to see them through that lens.
All right, I want to go back to the issue of the Columbus statue. Is it do I have you down wrong as one of those persons who wanted to smash it? And the question is that people are saying that to take it to the library and what have you.
So we spoke to the former mayor Martinez, and we warned him early on that the people were going to continue to vandalize the statue until he removed it. We felt that it is a valuable part of our history, not in the sense of something celebrating Columbus, but that a historical individual took money out of their own pocket and placed it there in 1881. And there's a lot of work to be done to see what that means, where it fits into that whole Columbus Monument building period and so on. And so it had its own value, and we felt it should have been removed from a museum. But of course, Mayor Martinez delayed, and Columbus lost his hand and other aspects of his and was damaged and destroyed in different ways. And now what we're recommending is that, when it be moved to the museum, we agree with the Warao people that we follow the example set by those in Bristol, UK, where the monument to Edward Colston, which was removed during the Black Lives Matter movement, rolled down the streets and dumped in the harbor. That monument is now housed in a museum in a prone position, lying on its side. And the graffiti and so on that the people imposed on the monument is there now as part of history as well. So we are hoping that the mayor will heed our call, and we believe he will, to keep the monument in its current condition, in a prone position in the museum, and therefore bring the people of Trinidad and Tobago in the 21st century into the historical conversation.
All right, and there's another part that seems to go with that, the renaming of people talk about these two things as though they relate, but they don't necessarily. That part of what is it, Port of Spain, to be renamed after Kwame Ture, who was Stokely Carmichael, and where is that?
Yeah, well, that is related in the sense that that's the next stage of this process. So the first stage of this process is to end the glorification of those who committed these colonial crimes against our people. These, and the second stage is what we would call our false heroes. The second stage is to now revisit the past as any decent, respectable, independent people would, and to identify those people who sacrificed their lives for the freedoms we enjoy today during the long night of colonialism, and to return those people to some prominence, because they would have been erased by the colonial authorities in favor of their heroes. And of course, they would have tried to convince us that their heroes were our heroes, and we know that is not the case. And so Kwame Ture will form, is at the vanguard of a number of local heroes who we will now seek to celebrate and to give thanks to and to venerate, that reflects the value system that we proclaim to the world today. Yes.
Yeah. And so there's no sense that there'll be too much of a pushback against that, because there was a time when I think we went over that when he was not welcome, at least for the authorities in Trinidad and Tobago, and then that was broken.
Yes, well, there were a number of figures. I think CLR James was also banned, and before that, before independence, a number of our heroes were persecuted in different ways. That's part of the life. I mean, Valentino had a song where he said, "Nothing is strange in the life of a man out for change," and so Kwame, would have been, well acquainted with that kind of activity on behalf of the authorities in different parts of the world. But I think that the PNM government, which was the government that banned Brother Ture, I think they have an important role to play in uplifting his memory, because they owe the country and Kwame's memory a debt. And I look forward to, I see that I think Mayor Chinua Alain is made a very important, advance the conversation in a very important way, but there's a lot more to come where that is concerned.
Yeah, and one could safely say that it's coming. It's the impediments, at least fundamentally sort of ideologically, probably even some of these things have been settled, and it's simply a matter of issues walking the process, and the process itself could be a challenge.
Yeah, I think the whole thing revolves around the moment when Mayor Martinez, vetoed the vote of his council and decided to remove the issue of the Columbus Monument to the Prime Minister's office. At that moment, I think we were emboldened to petition Parliament, having turned over 10,000 signatures to Martinez, and having all those efforts rebuffed. We were emboldened to petition Parliament, and I think we have to acknowledge, the parliamentarians who, having looked at the issue squarely, looked at the information that we provided in the petition in 2021, voted unanimously to set up a committee to review all colonial monuments or monuments to white supremacy and colonial violence in this country. And I think once that was done, and we're still, of course, we know that committee would have handed in their information sometime in January, I believe. So we're still waiting for that, the results of that committee to be made public. But that's going to open up a new conversation about monuments that go beyond those that were raised by the Caribbean Freedom Project initially.
All right, my friend. Thank you very much. We're going to have to leave it there. But keep good.
Thanks for having me, Brother Andy. All the best to you and Sir Charles.
Thank you very much, my friend.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
All thanks as well to Dr. Claudius Fergus and Wendell Eversley. It's been a pleasure. I'm Andy Johnson. You're going to hear from me again as we continue with this kinds of discussion on the station. So, Charles, it's back to you.
Thank you very much, Andy, and it's good to have you. Remember, people inside of the DriveTime Exchange, Andy Johnson joins us on a Wednesday and a Thursday. Rerun of the program tomorrow morning at 8:20 a.m. on NewEraTTRadio.com.